Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
We're 3 away from 50. I think we have to have like a little party when we hit 50. That's a milestone.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. We could have a little online party. Everybody could bring their online drinks or candy or balloons or whatever.
How about cupcakes with little candles in it? 50 candles in one cupcake.
There we go. Yeah. Well, or at least a little cupcake emoji with
That's
50
true.
candles in it.
Yeah, let's do it. So good morning, everybody. It is June 9th, 2020. I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolfert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And actually, Mark, I have a question for you. You have stopped saying "in the year of our Lord 2020."
I am an atheist now. I'm an atheist now, I guess. I don't know. I tried it a few times and it didn't stick.
Didn't feel good.
Maybe I should just have gone the other way and just started saying Anno Domini 2020 or something. I don't know.
There you go. All right. So we thought that it'd be good to return to the issue of the pandemic.
Everybody's favorite topic.
Everybody's favorite topic, because that's what got us rolling in the first place. We owe our lives to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Kind of a flip side of dying from COVID thing.
Yeah.
So right. So then the uprising happened. That kind of derailed the pandemic.
Yeah, the poor pandemic is like, what? This protest thing's getting all the glory. I need to reassert myself. But
right.
That hasn't really quite happened yet. That's what we're talking about. Like, why aren't we seeing the spikes that we're in?
Yeah. So, we just didn't think that anything could knock the pandemic off of the news, but something did. Right. And so, we're feeling bad for the pandemic. So we thought we'd talk about it again.
Yeah.
But actually, the really interesting thing about this is the whole question of what really is going on with the pandemic right now. Because Minnesota has been this very interesting epidemiological experiment over the last 2 weeks, where we have had literally hundreds of thousands of people outdoors next to each other.
Not social distancing.
Not social distancing. Now, a very high percentage of masking.
Yeah.
A very high percentage of masking. But not social distancing at all. And yet, and we're way past the amount of time of what is considered incubation time for the disease. And we are not seeing a massive spike in cases. In fact, we're actually seeing the opposite. Minnesota cases continue to decline. Now, that's not happening everywhere. And in fact, what's interesting is that about half the states in the United States are seeing increases in illness. The majority of those states are in political red states, which is kind of fascinating. But here we've got this kind of very odd phenomenon. And so we thought we'd chat about that a little bit, and also talk a little bit, I think, about the general sense in our country that people have kind of given up or forgotten about the pandemic in a lot of ways, and kind of what's going on with that. So one of the things I thought would be interesting to start with about that, because I've seen a number of comments in this regard, and I think it relates very much to the whole issue of change and spirituality, and even some of the issues that the protests have raised, is that it seems that a big part of the concern that people have about the pandemic and all these things that we're supposed to be doing is that they don't like the idea of things not being normal.
Mm-hmm.
right? So I've seen this a lot. Like, I don't want to wear masks. I don't want to stay at home. I don't want to social distance because I'm not going to be forced into this new normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this big reaction to, and as I said, this is very similar to what's happening with the uprisings in terms of changing how we do policing and public safety, right? I want to stay with what is normal for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things we like to do.
Well, when you're freaked out about stuff, that's the go-to response, right?
Well, when we're freaked out about stuff, but also just in general, right? I mean, and especially if we're comfortable, right? So this meme I saw this morning about that shows a thin, blonde woman in a boat, right? So it's obviously the sort of archetype of a, wealthy, privileged white person who has enough money to have a boat. And there's this whole list of, I'm not adjusting to the new normal. I'm going to do whatever I want, and the picture shows her hair is kind of blowing in the wind, and so again, if normal is privileged and happy, I don't want to give that up. I refuse to give that up.
Mm-hmm. This has been, it's interesting. Like, I think part of this shift, it's hard for me not to imagine part of this shift towards, like, we have to get back to normal. As a Minnesotan, like, we expect to be kind of hibernating in the winter and to we feel restricted until the spring comes. And then it's like, finally I get to live. And so I don't know how much that mentality plays out in other places, but to me, I assumed that once the warm weather hit, that a lot of these northern states would begin to struggle in new ways against these measures. And so I think part of that is, like, it makes sense. And I think some of that lent a lot of energy and heat to the emergence of these protests too, this sort of cooped up, pent up, don't know what to do with myself energy all came spilling out.
Right. Yeah. So Connie's got a comment here. Let's throw that up.
That's great. Erie County is seeing a spike and is one of 2 counties in Pennsylvania to stay in yellow and not move to green. I don't know what the colors mean.
That's the different phases, like it's, phase 1, 2, 3 of opening up.
I see.
So
yellow is
yellow, red, green. Yeah.
Don't know the reason for the spike. People anxious to get out, but should they be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and so that's one of the funny things that's happening with this, right? Is that now there are many different trends going on all over the place, and actually, somebody mentioned at our CPI board meeting a couple of weeks ago a particular, similar to what you're talking about, Connie, a particular county in Indiana, that there's this huge uptick. And it's a place where, people often didn't really believe in the pandemic to begin with. And so there are a number of things that people are hypothesizing about this, right? That, there's a real connection with age, right? So most of the protests have been young people. I mean, Deborah and I have been at a number of these marches where we're clearly just about the oldest person there by decades. It's kind of funny. But those young people are going home to maybe interacting with other people who are not so young. But so there's that. Then there's also the question of indoor versus outdoor activity, right? So it really may be, excuse me, it really may be that, outdoor transmission. Mark, you need to talk for a minute. I gotta mute this and cough.
Okay, well, Dan's coughing. I'm assuming you're talking about maybe there's a big difference between how the disease responds outdoors versus indoors. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about that, but it does make some sense that being in stagnant air that you're breathing in and out all the time would make things worse when it comes
right. Yeah, so that's one of the ideas that we may be learning, that outdoor transmission, especially when a high percentage of people are masked, is actually pretty low, which would be kind of a cool thing to find out. And there are a number of epidemiological experts who have insisted for a while now that if a significant percentage of people wore masks, that transmission would really, really go down. And so again, at a lot of these protests and marches, mask wearing rate has been incredibly high. And a lot of the organizers have been great about that. They're passing out masks. They're actually looking for people in the crowds that do not have masks. They're giving it to them. People have been responding really well to that. I mean, I've been at a number of events where the rate of mask wearing is pretty darn close to 100%. And so, we may be finding out that, that actually really works. And, we all could go to our favorite sporting events if everybody was masked and it was an outside field.
Here's a comment from Kathleen. I confess that it makes me angry that I have spent months sheltering while others are out doing all sorts of things. I am part of the vulnerable group, so I feel endangered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, that again, there's certainly been a level of societal narcissism that we've seen in this, where there is a whole group that basically are like, I don't really care. I don't care if my behavior makes other people sick. I don't care. Whatever, I'm going to do my thing, and that's the most important thing. And it's very distressing. So I totally sympathize with that.
One of the questions I've been thinking, and I haven't had the heart to go look at conservative pages to find out. I just don't really want that grief. Is how much has there been a conservative reaction to? It's like, look, all those libs, they've been complaining about this mask stuff, but one black guy dies and they just start acting like there's no pandemic. I wonder if that's been happening, because it
has.
Seems like the direction I would expect things to go.
Yes.
And there's it's legitimately concerning to have thousands of people all huddled together. And
right.
Even with the masks on, like when you're tear gassed, you don't keep your mask on because you need to breathe and pour water over your face.
Yep. No, that has been a reaction. There have been many, many people that actually have been specifically talking about that in relation to church services, right? Yeah. Like, it's okay to protest police brutality, but it's not okay to go worship our Lord Jesus. So that's been a very prominent theme the last couple of weeks.
That shows you love man more than you love God.
There we go. Yeah, and again, it's to me one of the real, I guess, tragedies of all of this is that it reveals at a further, deeper level the chaos and the basically grossly incompetent way that we have handled this from the beginning. And if we remember back when this first got started, and there wasn't any organization, there wasn't PPE, there weren't consistent plans, there was no federal leadership, that kind of sowed the seed for this very very divisive way of dealing with this in America. Now in this, I just kind of feel like we've layered a whole other layer of chaos on top of the chaos that we already had to begin with.
So I'm wondering about where do you think things are going to be headed? I mean, I know it's a predictions game and we probably shouldn't be too confident in any things, but right now we have this intensification of this political moment. The police are acting like tantrumy children. We have a president who's hopped up on himself and afraid of Antifa. The idea of there being leadership during this time, which I didn't think the leadership we had could get worse. but I've been proven wrong.
Right.
So I'm wondering what this summer is going to be like.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what everybody is wondering, right? I mean, in the medical world, certainly everybody is kind of holding their breath right now and just going, okay, like what is going to happen in the next couple of weeks, and how bad is it going to get, and is it going to completely undo everything that we've done in terms of, right, all of this isolation and social distancing. Then you've got another group that's like, well, we did say that it was possible that during the summer things would kind of calm down, but then are we going to get whacked big time next fall? And then of course you have all the people in New Zealand who are totally going back to normal because they've eliminated the virus in the entire country. So it's yeah. I mean, and I also think this sort of weird sense of resignation that I've read a bunch of stuff where people are just like, well, we're just all going to get it, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and that's just what we have to deal with. And so it's a kind of fatalism, because it's clear that any other coherent approach is hopeless at this point.
Well, and there is a sense in which, even with all the ineptitude, we slowed it down. So there's a
yeah.
So I guess, like, if there is a return to, like, oh, let's go back to normal, and we see another spike, maybe it won't be as bad as it was. I mean, I guess maybe that's the only concession that we get, is it could have been worse.
It could have been worse. It could always be worse. Isn't that's a real Minnesota-ism, right?
That feels like a very white, stoic, Scandinavian, Germanic way of looking at the world, and I somehow deeply resonate with it. I don't. Some comments. Connie said that there has been a lot of outdoor activity near Lake Erie. We think that might be causing the spike. Erie is a vacation area. I mean, that's one of the things that they were warning about, and this one of the reasons why Florida is listed as one of the states that's seeing an increase, and for that reason, they assume. And there have been protests here. So, yeah. Maria writes, I'm trying to navigate how to meet face-to-face with my group that we have been meeting online. I'm recommending that we meet outside, masked, with social distancing. I'm also asking people to use their phones to get online so we can include those who don't want to meet face-to-face.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a wise, I have friends who are starting pastor friends who are starting to meet congregants, like in outdoor locations, like at the church, where they're a little farther away, and that seems like almost a human necessity at some level.
Yeah, and Maria, I think that that's really where the recommendations are heading, right? And especially, again, you look at the demographics of your group, right? How old are people? What is the level of vulnerability? And so, yeah, I mean, if you have a group that is relatively young, relatively healthy, has been relatively socially isolated, and you get together in an outdoor space and you sit a bit far apart, and you're masked and you talk to each other, what it sure is looking like is that the relative risk of that sort of activity is extremely low. And again, and this is something that I've been advocating for from day one. I mean, we just need way better information and encouragement of how to engage each other in a way that is low risk. And we really have never gotten that. And again, what's interesting to me about the protests is it basically has sort of forced this experiment. Like, okay, so if we're going to go outside, we mask up as much as possible. The people who are at higher risk try to be a little more socially distant. And then we see what's happening. And again, so far what is happening is that we do not have a major problem here. So far.
So far. Alex has a good thought. Any thoughts around the righteousness of the movement and how perhaps the virus spreads less? For example, these folks are mainly the types of folks that would listen to doctors as much as possible, wearing a mask, staying 6 feet away. Therefore, they would have less exposure. They come out to protest injustice, and they're less likely to transmit something because they are more intentional. There are people walking around with hand sanitizer, with masks, and providing care. I do think that the level of precaution and thoughtfulness has helped, but it doesn't seem to be a universal experience from what I've seen. Like, especially when you're in the midst of things, people were really forgetting about the pandemic.
Yeah.
Especially in those first nights where you just tear gas, people running around, like, touching each other, helping each other up.
Yeah. I'd be very nervous about connecting righteousness to any of this. And certainly, up at the murder site, especially over the weekends with the huge crowds. I mean, there have been, groups of young people doing breakdance performances, and they are packed shoulder to shoulder. Almost none of those people have been wearing masks. People coming and going all the time. We have the famous, what I call the American COVID mask experience, which is wearing your mask like this. So your chin does not get COVID.
Yeah, your chin is safe.
Your chin is very safe. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's either some sort of incredible luck, or, as I said, it really is that outdoor risk, especially with groups of young, healthy people, really is a lot lower than we initially thought. And, and that'd be great.
Something from Catherine. One local place to watch: a volunteer at Bethlehem Lutheran Church food bank just tested positive for the virus, and they shut down for cleaning. I've been seeing incredibly long, urgent, and crowded outdoor emergency food bank lines. Hoping your guesses are right and that it's harder to spread outside among masked people. I hope it is. Like, part of me worries that the testing is lagging, that maybe the length of the incubation time has lengthened, or I'm just waiting. I'm kind of afraid that the ball is going to drop.
Well, yeah, and as I said, that's what a lot of people are, in the medical world. There's a lot of talk about this right now, and there are a lot of people that are kind of in breath-holding mode. And one of the things, Catherine, that's very clear, and actually there was just an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that came out yesterday about this, is that what does seem to be clear is that there's this phenomenon of what's called the super spreader. So you get one person that has the virus and is in some sort of close quartered place. We saw this at a funeral in Georgia early on, in a small county. We've seen this in a number of other of these gathered places, and that person seems to be responsible for a huge number of cases that then kind of blows up. So, for example, in that one small county, which was this tiny rural county in Georgia, within a couple of days, there were 1,700 cases after this funeral. So, right. So, somebody who's an employee at a food bank where there are tons and tons of people coming through, I think that is very much where you run the risk of this kind of super spreader phenomenon. And, in that particular example, but that's something that you will start seeing. And so, right. So within, 2 weeks, if some of that is going on here, we will be seeing it. And actually, there was a lag in testing, not this last weekend, but the weekend before in Minnesota because of all the uprisings. But that has really caught up. And in fact, this weekend was one of the highest testing weekends we've had in Minnesota. And again, the number of cases, and certainly, and the other more solid piece of data is the number of hospitalizations and deaths. because that's a real clear number. And those have also continued to decline. So so far, we're not seeing a big explosion from this. And certainly if we don't see it in another 2 weeks, I think it'll be pretty clear that this sort of activity was maybe not the kind of problem we thought it was, or at least was not the problem we thought it was at this time, right? Because again, yeah, maybe the summer months it's different.
Well, that'll be around episode 60.
Right.
We'll be like, wow.
We'll broadcast from our hospital beds.
Yeah. Or from a secret bunker protecting ourselves from the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. But you know, I do want to come back to this whole thing about the new normal, because I do feel like that is very very important to kind of struggle with and recognize, because in many ways that is what these protests are calling for, right? I mean, at the heart of all of these issues around injustice is the cry for, we need a new normal in America, right? We need an anti-racist normal in America. And you know, the people, and many people don't realize this. I get it that there's a lack of awareness about this, but the people who are calling for the status quo and saying, oh, let's just, you know, tweak the police a little bit here and there, and you know, let's just have kinder and gentler RoboCops. That's that same sentiment as the people who are saying, I'm not going to wear masks, I'm not going to social distance, I'm not going to go for a new normal. It really is very much that same impulse. We don't want to let go of the old normal and embrace something new and different. Yeah. But we need to. You know, if we want our country and the world to be better, we need to. And that's one of the ways that, you know, spiritual practice, spiritual community, movement, solidarity helps with all of that. It helps us learn how to embrace a new normal and not be afraid of that.
Well, it shows the power of disruption. I mean, a lot of these tactics that we've seen are a disruption tactic. And, you know, last night we finished our film group that we were doing, and we watched the film Selma, which again, same thing. They were people resisting the changing of the status quo. And if you bring enough disruption, where people are like, oh my God, my life will be disrupted constantly unless I change a little bit. Like, that's what we see in this country, that fear of a greater change causes them to negotiate towards just a new, maybe less drastic status quo change than maybe the protesters would want, which is usually what's end up happening. I'm pessimistic that we'll get all the things we want when it comes to police abolition.
Yeah. No.
But we better damn sure get a lot better than we have now. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. If we could get a few better things, that would be great. And yeah. And so I mean, the pandemic first is this massive disruption. Now we have these social movements, which are a massive disruption. Yeah. And I think that, you know, so many people, and again, particularly the nice, happy people in their boats, you know, they want to resist that disruption, right? We want to, I mean, how many times have we heard this getting back to normal? And I think one of the things that we have to keep saying was normal was not where we want to be. You know, we've talked about this so much on this video cast, right? Normal is not where we want to be. And so, you know, to reimagine the new normal as good rather than the new normal as bad. And that's, you know, that works against our ego process.
Anybody else out there have another question or comment? The seconds are ticking and we're about to close out. Sometimes we get the bombardment at the end.
Yeah. No, this feels like a pretty mellow episode.
Yeah.
Had-
Well,
had
death
some
and
great comments, and but yeah, protest, pandemic, death,
yeah. David writes, getting back to better.
getting back to better. I
That's a
like
nice
that.
slogan. That's a slogan for a presidential campaign right there.
There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
getting back to better.
Getting back to better.
Yeah, so there's a lot of resistance to that. And oh, Adam, also awesome. Okay.
Yeah. I knew Adam was lurking back there. That's why it's so important to have people fighting for change at every point on the spectrum. The left pulls further towards change, and the folks not as far left help make the compromise real. Yeah.
Yep.
And amen.
Yep.
Catherine writes, this is a very long, urgent comment that I just spent 30 minutes composing.
Okay.
Alex writes, this is so true. We need an anti-racist lift up and give power our poor, lower, and middle-class communities. That is slowly going away. We have a leader that doesn't care anything for anyone but the super rich and has not hid any of his own white supremacy leadings. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. What we've been experiencing hasn't been normal. It's been an intensification. It's been a degradation away from like a bad normal to a worse normal. So this, and it was all caused by us being too stagnant. I mean, I love hating on neoliberals and the Democratic Party for just being too willing to settle as things continue to slide rightward. And we're seeing agitation pushing back. I'm hoping it breaks up a better normal. Heather writes, I'm in for abnormal. Amen. When people do not follow the conventional social and moral rules for their society, the behavior is considered abnormal. If a person's behavior brings discomfort to those in observation, it is likely to be considered abnormal. I love being abnormal.
Right.
Gives my life meaning.
I love that. Thank you, Heather. I'm in for abnormal. That's a great place to end.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Great having you with
tomorrow.
us. See you tomorrow.
And we'll figure out what we're talking about between now and then.
All right. Bye.
Bye.